Welcome back to part 3 of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, an introductory course to this transformative gift that has traveled through the ages, throughout space and time, to help us along our journey to self-realization. I'm Jeanette Connery. I'm a yoga therapist in Chico, California. I have a private yoga therapy practice, and I also teach public classes. I do pelvic floor work, trauma work, chronic pain work. And on my own chronic pain journey, I have discovered that working with the mind is indispensable. The mind and the body are so intricately intertwined. In fact, one of my teachers, Rama Jyoti Vernon, and I believe this is a quote from one of her teachers, but she says, the body is crystallized mind. So if you take a second to absorb what that means, working with the mind has immense power to influence the physical experiences that we have in these bodies while we're on this planet. So we're going to start with the Sahana chant. This is a chant that yoga teachers do with their students when they are studying material like this, because it's so it's a sacred experience for me as a teacher and for you as a student to be here together. And this mantra just states that we've come together as students and teachers to share this sacred learning. Let us be protected and nourished. Let us have energy and awareness to fulfill this task. Let us enjoy our time together. So, sitting up straight and tall, with your feet flat on the floor, reaching the crown of your head up to the sky. Feel the weight of your body pressing into your chair through your sitting bones. And feel as though those 2 points are reaching in opposite directions, lengthening your spine. Take a deep breath all the way down into your feet. Let it go slowly. Just listen to the chant. Take in the sacred vibrations of the Sanskrit language as a sound healing. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvi Navadi Tamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. In the past, present, and future, and in all the 3 lokas, the 3 realms. Okay, so a recap of the books that have influenced my learning and the topics that we'll be discussing. The Secret Power of Yoga by Nishala Joy Devi, and the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, book 1 and 2 by Rama Jyoti Vernon. Both of these teachers are my grand teachers, or my grandmother teachers. Rama's no longer in her body, but is with us in spirit through her teachings, and I'm sure she's floating around enjoying thoroughly. She was a very thorough scholar of Sanskrit and studied under many Indian gurus, and Nishala Joy Devi also studied under Indian gurus, and of course, obviously, they both will have American influences. They're both American women, and Nishala is still around. She's still teaching, mostly philosophical stuff at this point. And The Path of the Yoga Sutras, this is an excellent introductory book for someone who's never studied the Yoga Sutras at all. It's good to know that it doesn't present the concepts in the order that they appear in the Yoga Sutras themselves, but there's still a good flow. And A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle is is about a lot of things, but does a lot of discussion about the ego, which ahamkara, asmita, is a big part of the Yoga Sutras. It's a big part of learning about yourself and your mind and how to work with things and how to become equanimous when you are trying to improve your body-mind manifestation. So the Paths to God is a discourse on the Bhagavad Gita by Ram Dass, another teacher who's left his body. But I love it for the chapter on karma. I actually love the whole book, but it's pertinent because of this chapter on karma. And also the Bhagavad Gita itself is largely about the 3 types of yoga: bhakti, jnana, and karma yoga. Considered the 3 different paths, which are a theme also in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. So if you're interested in learning more in depth about those 3 paths of yoga, that's a good read. Okay. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali begin and end with this. If you only remember one thing from this class, this is it. And you'll know because I'm bringing it up 3 times in the 3 sessions. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is to still or quiet the waves of the mind, which are very stormy indeed. And that's a very typical translation, Nishalist translation. Yoga is the uniting of consciousness in the heart, which is kind of the same thing if you really think about it. But she has this really beautiful way of distilling the Yoga Sutras down into something that can hit down into your soul, kind of at the heart level. And so we learned last time that those vrittis that we're trying to still are pramana, correct perception; viparyaya, incorrect perception; vikalpa, imagination; nidra, sleep; and smriti, memory. Everything your mind does can be boiled down to these 5 things or combinations thereof. We covered this in more in depth in the first session. So if you want to go back and relearn or revisit, or if perhaps you're someone who's just listening to this 3rd recording without having seen the first 2, now you know where to look for more detail on those. Very important part of the Yoga Sutras, and I would say that much of my work personally in changing my personality and improving my my mind has been studying my mind in the context of these vrittis and the kleshas and the ego. So here we have the kleshas, and ego is actually one of them, asmita, undue trust in the individual self. All of the kleshas flow from the first, avidya. So avidya is not really remembering your true nature, who you really are. You are divinity itself, encapsulated in this body. You are one with all, despite the appearance that you are separate. For this time, it appears as though we are separate, but we actually are still connected. And so the kleshas are considered afflictions, whereas the vrittis, we'll go back to that slide. These vrittis are neither painful nor pleasant. They're neutral, really. They can be one or the other, or neutral. So they're not inherently bad. These, on the other hand, I wouldn't say they're bad either, but they are very unhelpful. They are afflictions that keep us from knowing, from remembering, and from embodying the truth of who we are. So we have avidya, asmita, which is the egoism, and raga, dvesha. These kind of go together. They seem to be opposites. They can also complement each other and play out together in the same situations. It's good to remember the idea is never to just allow. Well, I'll start with raga, attachment. So it's okay for us. In fact, it's good for us to enjoy pleasures in life. And then with dvesha, aversion, of course, it's healthy to do your very best to avoid things that are harmful to you or unhealthy or unwholesome. However, the important work begins when inevitably unwanted things do appear in our experience, or our wanted things are not present. How do we interact with that experience? And that's what this is pointing to. Abhinivesha, the last of the kleshas. This is always the last to be dissolved. It's always the last to be addressed. Fear of death or clinging to the body. This manifests itself in lots of different ways. And I guess you could say that we spend our life preparing for death so we can leave the body gracefully, which is a lot harder than it sounds. Of course, we can always intellectualize and say, oh, I'm not afraid of death. I know it's a part of life. It's just the next phase. But when it actually happens, it's very different. Okay. Samskara and Vashana, still reviewing previous concepts that we're going to need to have these fresh in our minds, because we're going to start talking about the Eightfold Path of Yoga today. And all of these things play into the yoga. They'll help a lot with context. So samskara are experiences or impressions that we accumulate over our lifetime and past lifetimes that influence the way we think, act, and speak. Trauma is samskara. Racism is a samskara. And Vashana is like the granddaddy samskara. These are impressions that come with us from lots of previous lives. They may not actually manifest in this life for us to be able to dissolve. We might have to wait for them to come up. But the idea with both of these, samskara and vashana, is that they are beneath the surface of your consciousness. They influence your life in ways that you don't see. But one of the things about yoga is that we're trying to make the unseen seen. So we're trying to not only become aware of how these are playing out, but to also invite them to be that brave, courageous, dauntless warrior that says, yes, I'm ready to face these demons. I guess you could make that metaphor. So when they come up to the surface, we want to allow them to do that and remain equanimous and avoid reinforcing them by falling into the thought patterns of the kleshas and the vrittis. So the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali are going to give us a lot, or sorry, the Eightfold Path, Ashtanga Yoga, is going to give us a lot of tools towards that end. Last concept before we actually dive in to the Eightfold Path, the eight-limbed yoga, karma. So something that I realized I did not address last time about karma is that there is this debate for some people, you know, determinism versus free will. So if I am the sum of my karma, if my entire life is just my karma playing out, then that seems like I don't actually have a lot of personal power over any of this. So is everything that happens to me just predestined? Or do I actually have free will? And like so many things in nature, you know, the more you study the sutras, the more you study yoga and nature and yourself, you will find opposites exist. Even opposites that seem to exclude each other exist together in the same space in the same time. We have to be able to work with that. And that requires a little bit of letting go, a little bit of stepping outside of the bounds of rationalism to some extent, to be able to say, yeah, it is both karma and free will. And it's a pretty, pretty cool, I think. That's the nature of the universe. We can't always put our finger on absolutely everything. Some things we just have to experience for ourselves and trust that experience rather than having some kind of a concrete, you know, like a textbook that tells us black and white. Okay, so here we go. Are you ready? We're going to get into Ashtanga Yoga. Ashta, the prefix ashta means 8, and anga means limbs. So you could call it the 8-limbed path or the 8-fold path. Kind of reminds me of an octopus. That's pretty neat. So these are the 8 limbs of yoga: Yama, Niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. Now, the Yama and Niyama come first. And let's see. Yes. They're the first 2 limbs, and this signals their importance, their utmost, supreme importance. You absolutely will not resolve your samskara, dissolve your karma, or escape the cycle of birth and death without living an ethical life. And remember, we're not trying to follow this ethical code. Oops, sorry. I used my arrows in the wrong way. I thought they were going to do something different. We're not trying to follow an ethical code because we're commanded to, because we fear judgment or going to hell. The yogic model sees each person as whole and complete, exactly as they are, and we take on this path voluntarily in the hopes that we'll assist in remembering and embodying our true nature, the true nature of all people and the entire world, divinity itself. So Ashtanga Yoga is also sometimes referred to as Raja Yoga. You might hear that out there. It's important to remember also that in the yoga world, these terms are thrown around a lot, and sometimes people mean different things. So just be aware of that. So in the Ashtanga Yoga, we have the outer limbs and the inner limbs. So these 4 are considered the outer limbs. And then these 3/4 are the inner limbs. Pratyahara sometimes is claimed as an outer limb, sometimes is claimed as an inner limb. It goes both ways. But I think the insinuation there is that these are kind of more surface, more gross, meaning like more on the physical level, and these are more subtle. So once you get to these, there's more refinement in the yoga practice. So the yamas and the niyamas are often referred to as the yogic do's and don'ts. However, this is an oversimplification. The yamas, which would be the don'ts, each contain do's and don'ts within themselves. The yamas are often referred to as the restraints or disciplines. And indeed, we do use restraint and discipline in living these ideals. We have to use a lot of willpower to change the way we do things, the way we think about things. Perhaps refraining from doing things we want to do, or committing to do things we might not feel super motivated to do in the beginning. In my opinion, Nishila's translation that the yamas are reflections of our true nature, that's right here, cuts right to the heart of the yamas and their purpose. So when you are living the yamas, you are living in a way that reflects your true nature. As yogis, we choose to embody these ideals because they reflect our true nature, because they do. Yeah, that's why we want to do it. And it'll bring us ever closer to our goal, self-realization and oneness with divine. In this way, the yamas are a checklist of qualities we should be cultivating if we're to become the beings that we want to be, that we can be, that we actually already are, underneath all the other stuff that comes along with karma and being in the body. So the same way all 5 kleshas flow from the first, avidya, all yamas flow from the first, ahimsa. Ahimsa is more than just nonviolence. It's developing the qualities outlined in Yoga Sutra chapter 133. Chapter 1.33. Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upekshanam. Kindness, friendliness, honor, equanimity. Towards the end of releasing anger. So we're trying to release anger, bitterness, hatred, malice. We're trying to swap them out, right? We're really trying to change the way our mind works, the way our emotions work. It's a big deal. It's a really big undertaking. We're trying to cultivate a mind that's this way, not that way. Indeed, Nishila's translation points us directly to the same idea. And remember, karma applies to thoughts, words, and actions. And the mind waves have a real effect on the world. So fantasizing about revenge or violence is just as harmful as acting on those ideas. Many yogis, especially those who are dedicated under a guru, will choose to be vegetarian as a means to practice ahimsa. So later in this chapter, Patanjali further expounds on ahimsa, asserting that as we become established in ahimsa, all beings near us will cease to be hostile. Wow, isn't that a yogic superpower? CV, I don't know if it's listed among the yogic superpowers because I haven't studied that part, but I would think it is. Okay, so Nishila's translation of ahimsa is reverence and love for all. Right. So this really takes it beyond just nonviolence and non-harming. This really reflects that we are shifting our mind to a very specific state, a very specific asana, right? A very specific posture in the mind. So, satya, this one right here, truthfulness. Nishala calls it dedication to truth and integrity. Signals to us to always be honest and never lie. That's the most basic interpretation. Patanjali is pointing towards all the colors and shades of this idea of truth and inspiring us to carefully consider the many ways we use our words in communication. Not only should we abstain from lying, but we should also abstain from deceit, partial truths, withholding truth, exaggeration, insults, not following through with our commitments. And I'm sure you can think of many more examples. Sorry, I had to pause for a second. Okay. On the positive side of this idea, we have the principle that we should always use our words to uplift and inspire others. Sorry, my cursor is doing that weird thing again where I can't make it. Oh, there we go. I'm trying to scroll through my notes. So we want to uplift and inspire others, to create beauty in the world, serve justice. There are all these wonderful things we can do with our words and our expressions, right? So expressions and communications go way beyond just words. We're talking about all the third chakra stuff, all the, not third, sorry, fifth, the one in the throat. All the ways we express into the world. I want all of our expressions to be reflective of our truth. So on the topic of gossip, because, you know, a lot of people will say gossip falls under violating satya. Of course, it's not satya to involve yourself with the spread of rumors, repeating information, not knowing its truth, or without regard to how the subject would feel if they knew you were talking about them, or kind of this idle speculation about things that people like to do. However, Nishala points out that women primarily cope with trauma and stress by talking about it with caring listener. Gossip was the original way that humans got news around about neighbors, family, friends, politics, and it served to form strong social bonds. It's good for people to talk. We must use caution about how we talk about others, right? So talk about others. It's a very human thing to do, but do it respectfully. Always have satya in mind. And we must always consider the value of satya in situations where we're thinking of speaking out or speaking the truth, right? Is it truth or perception? So that's a very important distinction. And we talked about that with the vrittis, pramana and viparyaya. How do I know that this is actually a fact? Or is it some sort of inference? Is it a perception of mine? Is it a perception based on valid information? Or maybe not, I don't know. But, you know, you have to consider that stuff before you speak out or enter into some kind of a discourse. Nonviolent communication is a movement created by Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, who gives us an excellent model for doing this. Through this model, we can speak the truth while avoiding inference and blame, taking ownership of our own thoughts and feelings, and fostering empathy and cooperation in conflict resolution rather than animosity and conflict. So I highly recommend nonviolent communication to all people everywhere. I think everybody should learn how to do it. It's really transformed my life and the way I handle situations where I feel, you know, like I need to address things. Okay, and so in regard to satya, there are those who use the practice of silence or minimal speech to deepen into this yama. It's a beautiful practice. There's an old Sufi saying that we should never speak at all unless our words are true, kind, and helpful. And another interesting thing to ponder is the idea that satya speech would always be clean and exclude curse words. I'm curious what you all think of that. Does anybody want to speak to that? I think we're going to move on. I'll speak to it. I know I have a filthy mouth, and it's, you know, going through the Yoga Sutras and relearning this information has really kind of inspired me to think perhaps that can be a new practice of mine, trying to clean up my language. Because again, the words that come out of our mouths always have a certain vibration. And what vibration do we want to put out into the world? What do we want to manifest in the world or send out to possibly impact other people? So Nishala's discussion of truth takes us further into the unfolding of truth and intuition in our own hearts. Living in a way that is not in alignment with our heart's own truth results in fear, constriction, and a tight body. So for Nishala, she's emphasizing that Satya is living your heart's truth, living a life in alignment with your heart's truth. Okay, moving on to Asteya. This one. So this would be conventionally non-stealing and non-coveting. Nishala calls it generosity and honesty. So we're obviously not to take what is not ours or what we don't have permission to take. We're also not to think about it. Time is a good example of stealing, right? It's possible to steal someone's time by wasting it, by appearing late at meetings, by being a no-show, by just kind of being unproductive with the time that you spend. Perhaps there's a specific outcome that people are expecting for one unit of time that they're spending together, like maybe you're on a committee or something. We want to be productive in that time and not wasting the time. That's out of respect for everyone else. And time, especially now, like time is so valuable. Everybody's always running out of time. People are really stressed and they don't have a lot of time. So when someone commits to giving you their time, take that as a sacred gift and treat it as such. Okay. Additionally, we're instructed not to covet material things, qualities that other people might possess that we don't, skills, jobs, etc., that belong to others. Instead, we're to keep our feet firmly on the path that is our very own Dharma, our truth in this life, our life's purpose. To stray from your own path will always cause a new pain, a new karma. And have you ever heard the phrase, compare and despair? The fact is, you can only ever be you. When I was young, I used to desperately wish that I could be someone else. And that was obviously a result of childhood trauma. But as I got older, I had to address that. I had to be able to come to terms with the fact that I'm me. And beyond that, I've actually been able to cultivate a loving attitude towards that and actually really enjoy being me and not wanting to be someone else. So I think that falls under Asteya. Compare and despair. You can only really ever just be yourself. On the mat, on the yoga mat, for example, if I have my eyes on the person next to me who has much better mobility and balance, and I think to myself, I should be able to do that, I will very likely end up with an injury. And it's due to my own foolishness, right? My own avidya, not remembering, my own asmita, my own ego. In asana, it's best to know your own body, its strengths and boundaries, and as much as possible, stick within those boundaries. So, Asteya, taking only what is meant for you. And then we come to brahmacharya. Right here. This is a popular topic for discussion. Abstinence from sex, presumably. Also, however, that extends to, attachment to sensory things. And Nishala calls it a balanced and moderate life. So, according to Rama, Brahmacharya literally translates as wandering teacher or teacher for God. In ancient India, spiritual teachers could only stay in one place for no more than 3 days in order to avoid forming attachments, in order to avoid falling in love and getting married, because that wasn't the purpose of their life. They had taken vows to serve God. So they took vows to remain sexually abstinent for that same reason. This practice is still used among those who've renounced a life of a householder, this abstinence. But in modern times, it is known that one can work towards spiritual attainment without a vow like this. Again, the important idea is not to be attached to sex or use it in a base or degrading way. Be responsible and respectful of yourself and your partners. In the tantric tradition of yoga, actually, desires and pleasure, including the sexual, are used in the service of overcoming attachment. Can you experience sense enjoyment without trying to make it last, without striving for more, without longing for it when it's gone? In Brahmacharya, we're encouraged to lead a balanced and moderate life. Nishala calls it orchestrating the glorious dance between our divine nature and human nature. Whew. Orchestrating the glorious dance between divine and human nature. Interesting, right? That really nods to the fact that there's some duality happening here. Here's some opposites playing out again, right? And we're trying to balance them. She also says that we should seek to emulate, but not resist, nature's beautiful patterns. You know, we are in these bodies. We are nature. We are prakriti. And that comes with certain special things that can only be experienced from these bodies on this planet. And that's not sinful. Okay. Here's an example of imbalance. Our current climate crisis is due to an unbalanced approach to consumption and sense enjoyment. Without regard for the future consequences, those in power more than a century ago resolved to act in favor of explosive economic growth and mass consumption, rather than moderate growth to ensure a greener future. The consumer culture was born in which the masses were induced to indulge every possible sense pleasure. We were taught that it's a good thing to do that, that we should indeed buy everything we possibly can buy, that we would want to buy. And this imbalanced approach to consumption got us into the current trouble we're in. So that's a really good example of violating brahmacharya. So that doesn't mean that, there are a lot of people who go to this extreme of like, I'm going to live such a simple life. I have known people who even like a married couple with a child who lived in this tiny home that had no electricity, no gas. They didn't own a car. I mean, they had money. They just chose to do this. And that always struck me as just kind of imbalanced, Maybe it wasn't for them. Obviously, everybody has to do what they want, what they're comfortable with in their life, right? So I shouldn't judge it. But it's something to think about, like, where is balance in your life? Where do you find that balance and that moderation? Okay, last one of the yamas, aparigraha, non-greed, non-grasping. This kind of really reminds me of non-attachment. Nishala calls it avoiding or acknowledging abundance. So many of us live in a mindset of scarcity, thinking that we don't have enough. Not only do we perceive that we can't possibly give generously, But we even drive ourselves crazy trying to get quote unquote enough. You name it. Money, time, wealth, material, love, food, etc. Some of us live our entire lives deferring joy until we have fill in the blank, right? I will be happy when I have this, when I have that, when this happens, when that happens. The principle of aparigraha encourages us to enjoy a simple life, de-emphasizing accumulation of material and emotional baggage. So it includes emotional, in favor of the joy of gratitude. The joy of gratitude, of the abundance that we experience. So there is kind of this toxic use of gratitude out there that I want to address. My parents have said this to me, and I'm sure many other people's parents have too. Anytime I had some kind of a complaint, some kind of a hardship I was going through that really, made me feel very low. Well, you should just be grateful. And then, you can fill in the rest, right? You should just be grateful that you even have a car. You should just be grateful that whatever. I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about. So that's not gratitude, that's guilt. Gratitude is joy. So when you choose gratitude, you're choosing joy. So when you engage in gratitude, it should feel joyful. Gratitude is saying, yes, I love this. Thank you so much. I am so happy, because when divine showers blessings upon you, that's what divine wants. Spirit wants to see you smile and be joyous. So allow it. Allow it instead of the guilt. Instead of, oh, well, sure, I have this great life, but other people in the world don't, so therefore I can't enjoy it. Okay. So in aparigraha, we let go of attachment to our worldly possessions. We also let go of attachment to our samskara. I was surprised to learn that you can actually be attached to your samskara. You can be attached to your struggling. You can be attached to your pain, but you can. So we're trying to let go of that too. Letting go of attachment to limiting beliefs, knowing they don't define us. And now we're going to the niyamas. So in chapter 2, sutra number 40, Patanjali tells us that through purification, purity, saucha, we come to find disgust in our bodies and the bodies of all others. Oh, that's so heavy. Wow. Okay, let's unpack that for a second. If we're cultivating amity, love, kindness, how can we turn so negative against our own bodies? Despite how the ancients may have looked at it or how some contemporaries may translate it, we don't have to take this literally. I think this sutra is telling us to remember that the body can be an impediment to spirituality if we become attached to its pleasures or if we get hung up on its imperfections. Being the feminist that I am, when I first started studying the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, I had a problem with this idea of purity as a value, because I was accustomed to a religious attitude towards women, especially sexually active women in particular, as impure, spoilt, unworthy, damned, right? But I don't really think this is what we're talking about here with Saucha. Sexuality's already been addressed in Brahmacharya. Other popular focus for discussion of Saucha is cleanliness, proper care for the body. Indeed, the Vedas, the Indian scriptures before the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, outline lots of details on how a person should bathe, eat, sleep, and carry out personal hygiene. The holistic approach to spiritual health inherent in the Vedic teachings integrates all possible aspects of one's life into spiritual wellness. So every part of your life is spiritual. Socha can also refer to continually refining the mind, keeping the mind clean. Initially see Socha as having lightness in the emotions and in the heart, and keeping the mind simple, free from complicated and confusing mental gymnastics that happen when we're a flurry with vritti and kleshas. Patanjali also tells us that with Socha, one gains a sattvic mind. Remember the gunas we talked about. There's sattva, rajas, tamas. And sattva is like the perfectly balanced, illuminated, calm and alert, energized and balanced mind, and becomes ready for self-realization. The 42nd sutra in the second book says, by contentment, supreme joy is gained. Okay, I want to pause here. Kind of jumping around too fast. So I didn't actually introduce this slide. These are the niyamas, the second limb of yoga. Devotional observances is what they're usually called, or just observances. So things that we do, things that we choose to do when we're on a spiritual path. Nishala calls them evolution towards harmony. When you do these things, you're going to evolve towards harmony. Ah, that's so refreshing. Thank you, Nishala. I just love the way she says things. Okay, so we talked about Socha and purity or simplicity, continual refinement. So we're going to talk about Santosha now, contentment or supreme joy. So yes, Sutra number 42 of the Sadhana Pada says, by contentment, supreme joy is gained. We're seeing again how the principles of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali reflect each other. Santosha is contentment. We all deserve to be happy and enjoy life. And I think it's so telling that contentment is considered an ethical responsibility to yourself, others, and the world around you. This is not to be taken as toxic positivity, though. Not toxic positivity. How can we embody contentment when we actually need some change in our lives? That's a good thing to think about. A lot of people come to that question when they're studying Santosha. How can I have contentment now? How can I be content when I've just lost my job? When I'm going through this divorce? When my mom just died, right? How can I be content? How can I be content? Perhaps, someone in a really bad family situation. I mean, the scenarios go on and on. There's no limit to the human suffering. How is it possible to have contentment in those situations? I think that we need to temper this expectation with some healthy dose of grace. Our level of contentment certainly will change depending where we're at in our lives. And I think the answer to that question is also going to be distinct to each person. In my experience, it comes down to two things. First of all, stop deferring joy to a later date if that's possible. If you fall under that category I was talking about later, where you're just like, I can't be happy now because I don't have the right partner. I'll be happy when I get the right partner, etc. But beyond that, allow contentment into your heart despite a need for change, while knowing that you'll also be taking action to make positive changes. So for example, going back to someone who has just lost their job. Okay, yes, I definitely need to get a new job. For now, I can be happy with the fact that I still have my home. I still have these valuable relationships. And I'm going to allow myself to be content with those things while knowing that I will be taking action to get a better job, get a new job. So but we're still on the really simple level here, right? It goes deeper than that. When you're in a really dark space, sometimes it may seem absolutely impossible. In fact, it may be impossible in the moment, wherever you're at, to feel content. And what I learned from a friend, I had a friend who, she's still my friend, but at the time she was going through really hard stuff. She was, you know, kind of losing heart in lots of areas of her life, her relationship with her partner. One of her kids was really struggling. She was really, really unhappy in a toxic job. Not super happy either about the living situation. And I asked her, well, what are you doing to cope with that? Like, how are you getting by? What are you doing? Because, you know, this person, I have always seen her as a really optimistic person. And she said, you know, I just look for beauty. No matter what's going on in my life, I know that if I look for it, I will see it. And it doesn't change what's going on, but it gives me hope. And I think that was so beautiful. You know, it's true. No matter what, if you look for beauty, you will see it. You'll always see what you're looking for. And just allowing that little bit of yumminess into yourself, into your heart, even if it's just for a moment, it's healing. And it might just be the thing that gets you through. Some people find a lot of inspiration by just focusing on the future. That's certainly how I got through my childhood. Just doing the absolute best I could in school, because that's the only thing I really had control over in my life. Switching schools every 6 months, I still managed to get A's. And I just was getting ready to be a grown-up someday. Just like, as soon as I can, I'm out of here. And, you know, what can I do to prepare for that? Well, for now, all I know is that if I get good grades, that'll help. So that's what I did. Okay. At any rate, we have this idea of holding space for opposites to exist simultaneously. It's rising again and again and again in nature and in these sutras. It's such a powerful tool for self-healing. Being able to accept that opposites exist, right? My friend with a really dark time in her life, she's holding space for that darkness, but she's also holding space for the fact that beauty exists in the world. Okay. So finally, we have Kriya Yoga. Remember this from last time. Tapas, Svadhyaya, Ishvara Pranidhana. Scripture, study of the scripture and yourself. No, sorry. Tapas. Austerities or self-training. Nishala calls it the purifying flame. Burning away the things that you don't need, that aren't helping you, in order to make room for the good stuff that you want to welcome in. Study of scripture and yourself, study of the divine self, nature, scripture. So Nishala includes self, nature, and scripture in the study of the divine. I love that. Ishvara Pranidhana, surrender to a power beyond yourself, or wholehearted dedication to the divine. We talked a lot about this last time. It's really interesting that these come at the end of the Yamas and Niyamas. To me, it seems like ahimsa is the seed for all ethics. I'll go back. Ahimsa. It's the first one. In fact, people say that all the yamas flow from ahimsa. And so if ahimsa is the seed,
I lost my place in my notes. I'm so sorry. I'm finding it again.
Yes, okay. Kriya Yoga is the culmination. So they're kind of like the bookends or the bread and the sandwich. They're things that hold it all together. As we go through the work of embodying the Yamas and the Niyamas, we see Kriya Yoga arise on its own. These things happen naturally as you're doing the rest of the Yamas and the Niyamas. Tapas, the purifying flame of self-discipline, showing up again and again, no matter how many times it takes, that's what you've already been doing as you try to live an ethical life. Likewise, as we endeavor to embody these values, we're constantly getting new insights about ourselves, nature, and God. And that's Svadhyaya. Finally, consider everything you have surrendered on this path by the time you even get here. You've already surrendered so much. Here comes Hatha Yoga. So if we go back to this graph, we see that the Yamas and the Niyamas are the ethics. Hatha Yoga is asana, pranayama, pratyahara. And then later we have Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi, the inner limbs. Okay. All right. I chuckle when people say that they do Hatha Yoga because I wonder if they know what that really means. Of course, in the world of yoga, especially now that it's dispersed all over the world through many different cultures, there's a lot of terminology that gets thrown around and used in lots of different ways. So let that be a reminder that when someone says anything about yoga, it's best to not assume that you know exactly what they're talking about. So Hatha Yoga in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali is asana, pranayama, pratyahara. In the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which is like the scripture about Hatha Yoga, the focus is a lot more on the body and like kind of like the outer kind of limbs, the outer kind of stuff that you do. Whereas the Yoga Sutras, Hatha Yoga is a part of a bigger whole that includes a lot more subtlety. So in general, Rama tells us, she's done the research. She says that in general, Hatha systems vary, but they will mostly consist of 5 parts: asana, pranayama, bandhas, kriyas, which in this case, the word kriya is used to mean energetic cleansing, and mudra. So there's another example of a word being used a completely different way. Kriya Yoga. Okay. Ha. The Ha in Hatha Yoga is sun. Da is moon. So Hatha Yoga is harmonizing opposites, the balancing of energies. I want to read to you a paragraph from Nishala's book about Hatha Yoga. It's on page 225. Here it is. The complete system of Hatha Yoga increases vital energy. By aligning our physical and subtle bodies. Subtle body usually means like the energy body, like prana body, like the movement of prana through the body, the nerves, and the breath. So, increasing vital energy by aligning the physical and subtle bodies. Through physical poses, asana, guiding and enhancing the life force through breathing practices, pranayama, and encouraging the senses inward through deep relaxation, pratyahara. That is, okay. All 3 aspects were designed to be practiced in concert, thereby harmonizing the body, breath, and senses. So pratyahara, we're going to go into pratyahara a lot more. But essentially, she's pulling out something really special about pratyahara that I haven't seen anyone else do, which is she's saying that it's done through deep relaxation. So I just thought that was a really good kind of summary about what Hatha Yoga is. So the progression of Hatha Yoga from asana through pranayama and to pratyahara in this order indicates an incremental shift from the external to the internal, subtle, as we progress through yoga. We're going beyond the body, beyond the breath, right? Into what comes beyond. So the third limb of the 8 limbs of yoga, asana. It's a big one. There's a lot to be said about asana. I would like you to close your eyes while I read to you the translation of these 3 sutras, which, by the way, are the only 3 sutras in all 196 sutras of Patanjali that talk about asana. That's the poses, right? So I want you to close your eyes as I read this to you. Physical posture should be stable and comfortable for yoga, right? We're talking about in the context of to do yoga. Physical posture should be stable and comfortable. By relaxation of effort and meditation upon the infinite, that posture is perfected. Thereafter, one is not disturbed by the dualities or pairs of opposites. Now, my question to you is, does that sound like a description of what happens in a yoga class? Taking it even deeper, what does it even sound like he's talking about? Elle, are you there? Do you want to?
Yeah, I'm here.
What does it sound like he's talking about?
It sounds like he's talking about just being in a comfortable posture at all times, being relaxed.
Yeah.
I don't know. You asked does that sound like a yoga class to you? And in most other classes that I've been in, no. But always in your classes, yes.
Oh, shucks. Thank you.
Of
Wow.
course.
You don't have to get extra credit in this class, you know.
I like extra credit.
So yeah, go ahead.
I just remember I went to one hot yoga class, and it'll be probably the last hot yoga class I ever do, just because it was so fast. It was not in any shape or form beginner friendly, and the person who was running the class just did not care to really help anybody. I don't know, it was just awful, and it was uncomfortable the entire time, and I wanted to leave. So just knowing that also knowing there's only 3 sutras that mention posture at all, and almost 200. There's 4 away from 200, and there's 3 that mention posture, but everyone's hung up on the posture all the time. Feels very strange.
Indeed. And this is one of the complaints that Indian people have about the way Americans do yoga.
Fair. They have all the points.
Right. I'm so sorry that happened, and I'm sorry anytime that happens to anyone, and it certainly happened to me. And I just don't think anybody should ever leave a yoga class in pain. I want to bring us back to the purpose of yoga, yoga chitta vritti nirodha, and that we are trying to get to samadhi. We are trying to get to unity with the divine, and through samadhi, which is meditation, right? So I think this being an earlier scripture, that Patanjali's focus was really in telling you just giving you a little advice on what you should do with your body and able to do meditation. In fact, a lot of scholars will say exactly that asana was originally meant just to get people prepared for meditation. After all, it takes a certain level of strength and endurance to sit still for long periods, and any distraction in the body at all will preclude you from entering samadhi, right? That is right here. Like, after that, you won't be disturbed by the dualities or pairs of opposites. I think in this case, we can see one of those opposites as being comfort versus pain. Okay, so Rama, who's a firm believer in the significance of asana as a vehicle in and of itself to self-realization, she's really big on asana. I heard her, I did meet her in person and heard her do a talk, and was that, you know, you can absolutely enter samadhi from an asana practice. She has this translation of these three asana, or these three sutras. Take any pose and be comfortable. It is through relaxation of effort and meditation on the infinite that asana is perfected. And that's really close to all the other translations. The third one, thereafter, one is not disturbed by dualities, these pairs of opposites. So her biggest one is, the biggest difference with her is take any pose and be comfortable. What I like about that is it gives us permission to not sit on the floor in crisscross applesauce or in lotus. Like, you do not have to do full lotus or meditate on the floor to be a good yogi. We work with what we have, right? A lot of us can't do that. Nishala's translation is, obviously, it's going to be very different. The natural comfort and joy of our being is expressed when the body becomes steady. As the body yields all efforts and holdings, the infinite within is revealed, and thereafter we're freed from the fluctuations of the gunas. Anishala, along with other teachers, reminds us that asana were originally created for male bodies. That's a very important point as well. A female body has different size and shape of the pelvis, different center of gravity, muscle composition, different hormones, different emotional and physical needs. So therefore, she encourages modification of asana according to helpful suggestions from a teacher, and of course, first and foremost, your own intuition. So I feel like I'm going to miss a really big opportunity if I don't say this now. Anyone who's ever watching this in the future or right now, you should never be in pain in a yoga class. And you should always feel free to stop what you're doing if it feels like it's not right for you, for any reason at all. Doesn't matter what the reason is. And if you experience a teacher who insists that you conform to what they're instructing, it's not your teacher. Okay. So yes, as Elle mentioned, when yoga spread to the West, our culture separated out asana and began to know that little part as the whole. This approach is not only incomplete, but it leads to harmful imbalances in people's bodies, minds, and prana. What we're doing is we're like stoking up the energy in the body without those inner limbs to balance it out, right? We pump our body full of prana with asana and pranayama, and then what do we do with that? Right? Well, there's a reason we're doing that on the path of yoga. We're pumping the body full of energy to make it lighter, to make it more closely resemble the field of universal consciousness that's around us, so that we can connect to it better. But we're kind of skipping that last part, and so you're just kind of burning out the energy system in a lot of cases, and in other cases creating injuries. So whatever your interpretation, you can conclude that asana is used to balance opposites, bring mind, body, breath together, bring strength and ease to the body, and escape the pull of the gunas, dualities, opposites. And once we've loosened our focus on the external in this way, we're moving ever closer to our goal of oneness with the spirit. It's like we use the body as a medium to transcend the body. Okay. Patanjali has a lot more to say about pranayama, the fourth limb of yoga, which is breath practice. So, yeah. I guess I'll just go ahead and read these to you. Pranayama is the regulation of the incoming and outgoing flow of breath with retention. It is to be practiced only after perfection in asana is achieved. And what is perfection in asana? It doesn't mean you can do the perfect handstand. It means stable and comfortable position in the body, relaxation of effort, letting go of effort, meditating upon the infinite, and escaping the pull of the gunas. Then you're ready for pranayama. It consists of inhalation, exhalation, and suspension. When observed according to space, time, and number, he's just saying count your breaths, count how long the inhale is, how long the exhale is, how many breaths per minute, etc. Then they become long and subtle. Okay, so this is important. There are a lot of breathing practices out there, many, and they all have a purpose. They're all good for one thing or another. There's no such thing as really a bad breath practice, but it might not be the right one for you. But with that said, whatever you're doing with your breath, at the end of the day, the objective is that your breathing will become long and subtle if you're trying to get towards Samadhi. The fourth type of pranayama transcends external and internal pranayamas. That means inhale and exhale, and appears effortless and non-deliberate. So he's saying, like, beyond inhaling and exhaling, eventually you're not even trying to do that anymore. It's effortless and non-deliberate, and it's long and subtle. Pranayama removes the veil covering the light of knowledge and heralds the dawn of wisdom. And then the mind becomes fit for concentration. Wow. Here's a quote from Rama. Pranayama is a powerful tool for unhinging the lid of the subconscious to bring forth the deep samskara impressions from the depths of the unseen portions of the mind. Wow. Yeah. Right? Okay. These are the qualities of prana. We're going to talk about pranayama. Let's talk about what is prana. It's intelligent and has its own consciousness. It's important for you to know too that, like, there is endless information out there about what prana is. This is just kind of like the pieces that I pulled out that seemed significant to me. It has its own consciousness and intelligence. It's neither male or female. What does that tell us? When we talked last time about Prakriti and Purusha and the male and the female and trying to transcend those dualities, prana is beyond dualities. That's pretty cool. That's really important. You could say prana is God coming into your body. The qualities and amounts of prana will vary depending on the needs of the organism, or, you know, the way the energy is used. Sometimes we don't have as much prana as we need, right? Sometimes we have too much prana. Referred to as ki in Japan and chi in China. It moves through the nadis, energy channels. which are also called meridians in the traditional Chinese medicine. Your attention, focus, consciousness, that's prana. Okay, so when you put your attention somewhere on your body, you're sending energy there. When you put your attention in somewhere else that's not your body, not your breath, not this present moment, you're leaking prana. Your prana is going somewhere else. Prana enters the body through food, breath, and sensory information. The sun, moon, stars, thoughts, emotions, actions, and words all have the capacity to enhance or diminish our prana. So we want to be careful what we put into our fields, what movies you watch, what songs you listen to, right? A lot of people will argue it doesn't matter, but it does. A vast amount of prana is required to raise the consciousness from the physical to the spiritual realms, which is why we use pranayama and asana to pump the body full of prana. A yogi is one who concentrates prana within the body. And prana is endlessly available all around us and is freely given. You will never run out. Like, there's no one saying, no, that's enough. You've had your allotment of prana. You don't get any more. That doesn't exist. And prana is never owned. You don't own your prana. You borrow it and you give it back. It comes in and it goes out. Continuously flowing is its nature. Prana does not like to be stagnant, to be caught, to be stuck. When that happens, we experience symptoms of illness. So these are the parts of the breath and their qualities. Inhale is called puraka, exhale is rechaka, and kumbhaka is suspension. And just like prakriti and purusha, each has a masculine and a feminine, or each one is masculine or feminine. The breath itself, when taken together as a whole, is fully balanced, or should be. So by balancing our breath, we're balancing these things in our body. And when placed after the inhale, the effects of the inhale will be amplified. So when we hold the breath after inhalation, the effects of that inhale will be amplified. And the opposite is true for holding the breath after the exhale. And so every time you breathe, you're receiving prana, you're receiving God, you're receiving life force energy and releasing it back. You're taking and giving, constantly going back and forth in infinity. Inhale, just those of you who are really interested in the nervous system and the way that plays out with yoga and breathing, the inhale is associated with the sympathetic nervous system response, increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, the adrenaline, right? And that's why, like, if you're startled, you go, right? You don't exhale when you're startled. And then the exhale is associated with parasympathetic, so decrease in heart rate, blood pressure, cortisol, etc. And this is how our nervous system balances itself all throughout every day. And so because of this, we get heart rate variability. And you want your heart rate to be varying based on whether you're inhaling or exhaling. And if it's not, that's a sign of chronic stress. And it comes with some health problems. So then number 5 is pratyahara. And I do think we might end up going over a little bit here. So if you need to leave, you can just go ahead and leave. Again, I'll be posting this for replay later. And if you want to catch what you missed, you can do that. Pratyahara. So let's start with what Patanjali says. When the sense organs withdraw from their external objects. Okay, so that means your ears, your eyes, your nose, your mouth, everything you use to sense, all those things withdraw from what they're paying attention to outside of you, and they follow the mind. That means they turn inward and follow the mind. This is pratyahara. And then follows supreme mastery of the senses. Wow, that's one of the things that we're trying to do. So we're getting there. We're really getting there. As with other yogic concepts and practices, there are some variations on the way people describe pratyahara. Some say it follows effortlessly from pranayama, while others say you are to cultivate it consciously, right? Some people say it happens all on its own, you can't force it. Some say pratyahara is simply drawing your attention inward and away from the external stimuli. Others say that's not good enough, that it needs to also be quieting the internal stimuli, thoughts, emotions, and vritti. So you'll find different opinions about that. My opinion is that we can use conscious effort to bring about pratyahara, and that quieting the internal stimuli is contained in the next limb, dhyana. So the creative part of my brain takes the idea that the sense organs, quote unquote, follow the mind, and extrapolates that. Perhaps we can master our senses to the point where it's possible to become skilled enough to bring forth any sensory experience we desire. Oh, wouldn't that be cool? I think that might be another CD. Wrapped up in pratyahara is the reoccurring theme of vairagya, non-attachment. The skilled yogi will be able to maintain concentration, calm, and quiet in spite of sensory distractions, such as construction noise or the smell of delicious food, which would potentially remind them of their empty belly and make them want to get off the mat. But that's really, really advanced. And for that reason, it's advised that if you are meditating, you should be in a place that's quiet and free of distractions. You'll hear that again and again in meditation instructions. So drawing the senses inward, it's like we're disengaging from involvement with the outer world. Limbs number 6 and 7. So now we've crossed over into the third pada. The 6th, 7th, and 8th limbs of yoga are in the third pada. So pratyahara is understandably the facilitator of the 6th limb of yoga, which appears in the Vibhuti pada. It is where Rama's book has ended, unfortunately. She did not get a chance to write that third book. And I did a quick search on the internet to see if I could maybe pull up some blogs from her or anything about these topics. I didn't find anything. Doesn't mean it's not out there. It could be out there. I don't know. So the 6th limb, Dharana, is usually referred to as contemplation. I consider it to be concentration. I realize that those are two distinct things and different. So I welcome you to make your own decision about what that means. But Patanjali says gathering consciousness and focusing it within is dharana. That sounds like concentration to me, and it's the first phase of meditation where we're training the mind to concentrate on one thing rather than allowing it to be carried all over the place by the vrittis. In dharana, we're trying to cultivate ekagrata, one-pointedness of the mind, meaning our ability to keep our attention on one thing only. It's an extremely simple practice, but incredibly challenging. The nature of the human mind is to wander all over the universe throughout time and space. It's described as by the ancients as a drunken monkey standing on a bucking horse being stung by a scorpion, right? So if they even felt like the mind was like that, can you imagine? Well, we really have our work cut out for us. Very hard to tame the mind. It can take a long time to develop ekagrata, especially as householders with so many obligations and responsibilities, right? These are all very distracting. If we all lived in monasteries and our meals were prepared for us and we just had these very simple chores to do each day, and other than that, our only responsibility was to focus and concentrate, right? And we were in this serene forest environment, it would be a lot easier. It probably still wouldn't be easy, but it would be easier than it is for us now here in this time and place. So in the beginning, absolutely any object can be used to practice Dharana. You remember in the first book, Patanjali told us to, he gave us a lot of suggestions about what we could focus on to get to Samadhi. It was like, you can think about this, or you can think about that, or you can think about that. You can gaze at an object or a picture of a person or deity with qualities you admire. You can focus on your breath, one of your chakras. You can cycle through all your chakra system. You can body scan. Some people find it easier to focus if they can move their attention from one thing to another. You can focus on your pinky toe, whatever you choose. It should either be positive or neutral, but never negative. And after a time of dharana and ekagrata, the object slips away and there's only awareness. This is how dhyana flows naturally from dharana. You will not, so dhyana is the continuous inward flow of consciousness. You will not be able to get to dhyana without first practicing dharana. And you'll never be able to say, okay, enough dharana, now I'm ready for dhyana. It will always happen on its own without any effort from you. In fact, striving for it will be a distraction. It will be attachment. It will create a delay. It's typical to experience each of these for small windows of time before the mind returns to churning, especially in the beginning. Little windows of time. You might sense some stillness there. And please take these experiences with gratitude. Enjoy them. Be glad you had that and know that they will come again with continued effort. Try not to be frustrated if they don't come back very soon or if they're very short. Again, that will only delay the process. Remember the Yamas and the Niyamas. Cultivate a light heart. A light heart. Just by trying, you will undoubtedly experience benefit in your life. Finally, we get to the 8th limb, Samadhi. Samadhi. When Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi, union with divine consciousness, seamlessly merge into one another. This is samyama, fusion. Through samyama, individual and divine consciousness gracefully unite. Patanjali spent the entire first pada describing Samadhi, so we already have a pretty clear idea of what it means, what we're trying to do, how we get there. Remember, the seer and the seen become one. That was part of, I think it was like the 3rd sutra. In Samadhi, samskara and karmas are free to rise to the surface and dissolve effortlessly. However, it doesn't happen instantly. The more time you spend in Samadhi, the more this will happen. Though Samadhi is the final limb of yoga, it's not the end of the journey. Just like the 12-step programs, we continue to cycle through the limbs, sometimes in order, sometimes not, refining ourselves a little more each time. When you come out of Samadhi, you'll be a human person again, with an ego, samskara, kleshas, and karma to work out. But presumably, with practice, you can work through them more quickly and perhaps more easily. the more you are able to embody the sutras, the easier it will be. The rest of Patanjali sutras are a recap of what we've learned and a description of the supernatural powers that can be developed through yoga. The entire work begins and ends with Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Why? Why is it so important? Well, now we know. So, I value your participation, your time, the effort that you put into studying these sutras, and I want to give you one more chance to make comments or ask questions before we close.
I don't think I have much else to say. I feel like I'm gonna have to rewatch this a couple of times to really like get everything. You
Right.
know? There's so much information that I can only like write down so much that like resonates, and there was a lot that did resonate, so I have to go back through again and rewrite down. It's just a lot of depth through it all.
Yeah, I think that all three of these sessions really could easily have stretched out much longer.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot, and I have such a passion. I didn't want to leave anything important out. And when you're teaching a quote unquote like introductory level, it can be hard to decide what makes it in and what doesn't, right? Because it's all so important. So yeah, I appreciate you sticking with it. And I hope anyone out there in the future who comes across these videos has questions or comments, they can definitely leave comments in the YouTube chat, or they can visit my website and find my email and email me. But that's actually super easy to remember. I'll just tell you right now. It's Jeanette@JeanetteConnery.com. And let's close with the loving kindness chant. This mantra is about praying that all beings everywhere will be happy, peaceful, free from the causes of their suffering, including us, and that our thoughts, words, and actions will contribute to the happiness of all beings everywhere throughout space and time. So finding your comfortable pose, your asana, the feet on the floor, sitting up straight and tall. Take a deep breath and just hear the mantra. Let it sink into your heart as medicine. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. And may our study of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, these precious, precious teachings, may our study benefit us, improving our lives, and as a result of that, benefit the world around us and the people around us. May that benefit ripple out to all places and all people. And may all people on this planet have access to clean water, nutritious food, medical care, adequate shelter, education, and safety, because they all deserve it just as much as we do. I bow to the light in each and every person out there, especially you, Elle, right now in this moment in time, for being here with me. Namaste.